Shalom, 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 Israel. I'm Brother Aaron. I'm out of Israelite Gathering Together. This is Ghana congregation. Today, I'd like to do a class on Purim. And this class will be done for brothers and sisters who may watch this video, and essentially for the brothers and sisters of Israelite Gathering Together. I also like to give double honors to all the prophets, apostles, elders, leaders, brothers who come out of One West, who established this truth through the Most High Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai. Yahweh being who the world calls God, and Yahweh Shai being who the world calls Jesus Christ. So I'd like to establish that before we even start. Double honors to those brothers and sisters if there were among them. As I stated, we're going to get into a class, which Purim, which is speaking of our deliverance out of the Medo-Persian captivity, right? There's some discussion amongst Israel whether or not Purim is doctrinal or should it have been canonized. Well, we know the Most High, our God, He doesn't do anything without purpose. So let's read some scriptures. I'm gonna try to go through it kind of quick, but I'm gonna be thorough because we're gonna read a little bit during this class. So the first precept I'd like to get into is Proverbs chapter 30 and verse 5. Proverbs chapter 30 verse 5, and it reads, "Every word of God is pure. He is a shield unto them that put their trust in Him." So every word of God is pure. If it's in this Bible, it's because the Most High God ordained it to be in the Bible. And we have to have faith. You know what I'm saying? Faith, as far as Hebrews 11 states. So we have to have faith that everything that the Most High is showing us today, these 66 books, actually 80 books to include the Apocrypha, were given to us in these latter times for our understanding and for our well-being as a nation, the nation of Israel. Let's get Romans chapter 15 now and verse 4. The book of Romans, chapter 15 and verse 4. And it reads, "For whatsoever thing were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope." And that's why we're going into Purim today, because Purim gives us hope. Hope, why? Because we know that there's a second Passover coming, and deliverance, the way that our ancestors were delivered, we will be delivered in these latter days. So let's go into the book of Esther. That's what we'll be reading out of today, the book of Esther. And what I want to do is, once I get into the book of Esther, right, I want to see something before I actually start reading it. That's something I want to go to the end of the chapter and get. All right, let's go to Esther chapter 9, and let's start at verse 25. Esther 9 and verse 25. Salakia, verse 26. It says, "Wherefore they call these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore all the words of this letter and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointed time of the year." Now we're going to get into those 2 days. I just want to read something. Now check out this next verse. Esther chapter 9, verse 28. "And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed." So we must keep this day according to the words of the Bible, according to the words of Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai. We're going to keep Purim through every generation. So if there's a debate going on whether we should keep it or not, it's in the Bible, so we're going to keep it. All right, so we're going to start Esther with book of Esther chapter 1, verse 1. Now I'm going to skip around a little bit, all right? Now the time period of Esther, I might be off a few number of years, but my time is either between 486 and 465 BC, right? That's when Purim happened, in between this time, right? Let's read. Book of Esther chapter 1, verse 1. "Now it come to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, that this is Ahasuerus which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia over 107 and Salakia, over 120 provinces. So he reigned over 1,720 provinces. Now you got to think how far Ethiopia is from India. So this is one of the largest landmass in history when it comes to rulership and kingdom setup. If I'm not mistaken, the largest. So you had the Persians and the Medes who ruled together. The Persians being the Iranians today, the Medes being the East Indian. They teamed up and ruled together, right? Let's read verse 2. That in those days when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all princes and his servants, and the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him. Verse 4, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent majesty many days, even 180 days. So a score is 20, is 20. So he showed his magnificence, this king of Persia, for 180 days. Now that is a long time to have a party. So he was very rich. You understand? All right, let's read on. Verse 5. When these days were expired, the king made a feast unto all people that were present in Shushan the palace, both unto great and small, 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace, where were white, green, and blue hanging. So that were their colors of the time, their royal colors. White, green, and blue. Those are the colors of Persia, Medio Persia. You know, Israel, we got scarlet, purple, and red, right? And it says, fastening with cords and of fine linen and purple to silver rings and pillars of marble. The beds were of gold and silver upon a pavement of red and blue and white and black and marble. And they gave drink in the vessels of gold, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance, according to the state of the king. And the drinking was according to the law. None did compel. For so the king had appointed to all officers of his house that they should according to every man's pleasure. So you can see that this king, King Ahasuerus, who we're going to come to know later on in the chapters, King Xerxes, right? If you Xerxes the first, that's who King Ahasuerus is. And Xerxes' reign was between 486 and 465 BC, right? So King Ahasuerus, his kingdom was flourishing, very rich. And he ruled from Ethiopia all the way to East India. We're talking about a vast landmass covering vast, parts of Africa, all the way to the east toward East India. Okay, let's see here. So we know that, like I said before, King Ahasuerus is Xerxes the first. That's who it is. So let's read verse 9. The book of Esther, chapter 1, verse 9. And Vashti, the queen, made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mahuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zetar, and Carcas, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king. Now, chamberlains would be eunuchs in the Bible, eunuchs, Salakia. There will be eunuchs in the Bible. So you understand what a eunuch is. It's a man that got circumcised, he can't have sex. So these who guarded the women, right? Verse 11. To bring Vashti, the queen, before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princess her beauty, for she was fair to look on. Verse 12. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. So here you have a woman in high esteem who is an East Indian or Persian. We'll go with that, right? And she fails. The king gives a commandment to bring her before him because he's throwing a banquet to all the princes, the rulers of all of his kingdom. She denies to come. Now, it ain't like today. A woman can deny a man, especially an Israelite man, so-called black man, black woman, native man, native woman, right? And get away with it, but not in this time. Let's see what happens. Verse 13. Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for so was the king manner toward all that knew law and judgment. And the next unto him was Karshena, Shatar, Admata, Tarshish, Meres, Mersina, and Myrmekan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, which saw the king's face and which sat the first in the kingdom, right? What shall we do unto Queen Vashti according to the law? Because she has not performed to the commandment of King Ahasuerus by the chamberlain. So the princes of Persia are asking, what are you going to do, king, man? Now let's go into that, because today, as a nation of people, as a nation of Israel, Ezekiel looked and saw us in this last day. He couldn't even see, he didn't even know who we were. And it tells you that we're so far away from our actual glory that the Most High bestowed upon us as a heritage when we were formed as a nation, that in this time you don't even know what's going on. So let's read a little bit. Let's get matter of fact, let's get Leviticus 19:29. Let's go there. Leviticus 19:29. Because this is what the king was dealing with. And he was not about to let this go over in his kingdom, or else all women would be out of control. Let's get this. Leviticus 19:29. Leviticus 19:29, and it reads, do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore, lest the land fall to whoredom, and the land become full of wickedness. How would that happen if Queen Vashti didn't show herself before the king at his commandment? Meaning, she can turn away, other women will follow her example, turn away from their husbands, then go sleep with other men, and that would in turn cause whoredom in their land. You understand? Let's get another precept. Let's get Deuteronomy 23:17. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 17. And this is very important for our young women in the congregation and all women throughout Israel. We are to be married to one husband as a woman, and be with him for all your days. Right? So Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 17. There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. So you see the Most High God, Yahweh, he's saying there should be no whores of the daughter of Israel. And a whore simply means you left your husband and you slept with another man while you are married. So that's what King Ahasuerus was trying not to do. Now let's go back to Esther. Let's go back to Esther chapter 1. Let's pick it up at verse Salakia. Let's pick it up at verse 17. All right, it says, for this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes, when it shall be reported. The king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. You see that? She didn't come. So we're going to go down and see what happened. We're going to finish out chapter 1. Verse 18, likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes, which have heard the deed of the queen. Thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. That's what was going to happen. Verse 19, if it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. So you see, the Most High put a spirit upon her, because the Most High controls all things. We talk about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he controls the heathen nations as well. So he put a spirit on Queen Vashti to rebel against her husband. Why? That's going to prepare the way for our foremother, Esther. Hadassah in the Hebrew, which means myrtle tree. Salakia, myrtle tree, right? Meaning blossoming. Okay, so let's continue on. Verse 20, and when the king decreed which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give their husbands honor, both to great and small. And the same pleased the king and the princesses. And the king did according to the word of Myrmekan being one of the chamberlains. Verse 22, for he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man shall bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people, because he ruled from Ethiopia to India. So he had a vast amount and different array of people. Canaanites, Elamites, Edomites, they were all there. So you see what happened, right? The queen rebelled in chapter 1. So now the king's about to put her away and give someone else her estate. Let's do this. Let's get, matter of fact, let's jump right into it. Let's go to Esther chapter 2. We're going to jump down to verse 4. Esther chapter 2, verse 4. And let the maiden which pleased the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan, the palace, were a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shemaiah, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. So here you have a Jew that's coming from the Babylonian captivity into the Medo-Persian captivity. And his name is Mordecai. You notice every time there's a woman in the Bible, even from Judah to our sister Esther to Susanna, there's always a man there. Deborah, however you want to speak her name. There's always a man of God there because God does all things in order. Let's get that real quick. Let's get 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 40. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 40. Okay, here it is. It says, let all things be done decently and in order. How do we know that? Let's get 1 Corinthians 11 and 2. 1 Corinthians 11 and 2. It says, no, let's start at verse 3. 1 Corinthians 11 and 3. It says, but I will have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is the Most High. So that's the order. So when you read in the scriptures and you see in Judges and you see other places where women, our foremothers of Israel delivered us out of the hand of the enemy, there's always a strong man there. Right? So here is Mordecai, who's going to be Esther's uncle. Let's read on. Go back to Esther chapter 2. Let's start at verse 6. It says, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jochanan, the king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And that's how you know it was a Babylonian captivity that Mordecai and Esther ended up in Persia. They were carried away under King Jochanan's rulership. Right? Verse 7. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther. And you notice how every time we go somewhere, our names change, just like it says in Deuteronomy, as far as the curses, we shall be called bywords and proverbs. So her name is Hadassah, but they called her Esther. It says, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So it come to pass when the king's commandment and decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan, the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. So you see that Esther is coming to the king's house. Mordecai is telling her to go there. You see how the story is playing out? Let's drop down to verse 10. Let's read on. Verse 9. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him. And he speedily gave her things for purification, which such things are belong to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given to her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best places of the house of women. As you can see, that she was under the keeper Haggai, right? He was in charge of the women. And he purified Esther and her maidens, right? But you can see the Most High showing favor unto Esther. And Esther had to be beautiful. And I'm going to show you why. Read verse 10. Esther chapter 2, verse 10. Esther had not shown her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her, Salakia, that she should not show it. So Esther passed for another nation. Esther was very beautiful. We have some of our, women of Israel, we come of all different colors, shapes, fashions. Some of us look Chinese. Some of us look very fair, light-skinned. We have different looks amongst Israel. That's 12 tribes. And so Esther looked very beautiful. And when he said he didn't show herself, her people didn't even know that she was a Jew. Right? Let's read on. Verse 11. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the woman's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Now when every maiden turn was to come to go into King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months according to the manner of women, for so were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odor, and with other things for purifying of the women. So the law of purification in order to go before the king, because he's getting ready to choose another wife. And Esther was preferred above all the other maidens, even by the chamberlain who was in charge of her. That's because the Most High placed the Spirit upon her, because he's going to deliver us from who? We're going to read it. There's somebody in the chapter who's we dealing with right today. He's still here. Okay? Esther chapter 2, verse 13. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, that she were called by name. So the king delighted in Esther. Let's read on. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abiel, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come in unto the king, she required nothing but what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all of them that looked upon her. So you see how Most High God is delivering us. Even if you read 1 Kings chapter 8, it tells you if we keep the commandments, he will show favor upon us in the eyes of our enemies, because we're going to have to, this judgment has to come. We have to go through the curses, because our Mashiach Yahushua is going to return. That's who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, to deliver us. So this thing is like a big play that we're living in. We have to do our part by keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, and always trying to stay faithful to the Most High God. Always, in all things, giving honor and glory in all things. And that's how we play our part. Even in our lives are playing out in the Most High's, I'm not going to call it a game, but in his design. Everything is working toward the good, which is the Mashiach Yahushua's return for the deliverance of the nation of Israel. All right. Esther chapter 2, start at verse 16. So Esther was taken in unto King Ahasuerus into his house, royal in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all women, and she obtained grace and favor in the sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So here's Esther becoming queen, Hadassah in the Hebrew. Now, when it says virgins mean young women of marriageable age. Now, we're using this right here, the Zondervan Comeback Dictionary, right? Let's open it up and let's get virgins. Virgin, it says a young unmarried woman, right? And then you skip over to the next page over here on the other side, right? It says a young woman of marriageable age, whether married or not. So you could be married, could have had sex. You still considered a virgin. It's a young woman of marriageable age. And as a matter of fact, we're going to go back to verse 7, right? Esther chapter 2, verse 7. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. For she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful. So women are also called maids or virgins, meaning young women of marriageable age, whether married or not. You understand? All right. And that should go against the virgin birth, because we're not going to get into that, but that's another class for another day. But those with understanding understand what I'm going into. All right. Let's drop down. Let's see. I want to kind of skip over. Yeah, let's keep going. In verse 18, then the king made a feast unto all the princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigtan and Tarish, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Why were they wroth? Because she was probably not of their nationality or ethnicity. You understand? So they were wroth, right? And in verse 22, and the thing was known, Salakia, yeah, and the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. Meaning Esther went and told the king that her uncle Mordecai has revealed a plot to take his life, right? Verse 23, and when the inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore, they will both hang on a tree. And it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king. So these two chamberlains were both found guilty of their plot against the king, King Ahasuerus, or Xerxes the first, and he hanged them on a tree. Now we're going to hop over into, let's see here. One moment. Salakia. All right, let me go back and say something. So you remember when Vashti the queen, right, didn't show herself. She didn't want to show herself or appear before the king. Now, what do you think that's an example of? Who is teaching that today? The so-called Edomite woman. She taught that in the 50s, talking about feminism. Then she linked in there transgender, LBGTQ. All these things are a spin from the Edomites, who God says he hates. So our enemy has set up devices and things set up. Even here, you're going to come to find out that they're here too, right? So what I mean to say is that the women of that time, you can see that they were in order. They knew that they have to have a man over their head. If a woman didn't have children, she felt she felt like this life wasn't meaningful, because to have children for your husband was how it was set up in the beginning. But not today. The Edomites have taught the world that you can have abortions. A woman can have free reign over her body. She can choose to. She has the choice whether her child can live or die. While they set up abortion clinics all amongst the Israelites community in the ghetto. And ghetto in the Hebrew means a place where Jews dwell. So they set up ghettos in all of our communities. I'm sorry, Salakia, set up abortion clinics all throughout our communities. You can't even go to the Edomites, the so-called white man's side of the place. There's probably one abortion clinic there. But in our community, there's many. It's like a liquor store. They like almost on every corner. That's a little exaggeration, but we have more than one in our communities. All right. Let's get, let's see here. Let's read Esther chapter 3, verse 1. Now this I'm going to spend a little time on because I want to make sure we understand who our enemy is. All right. It says, after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and his seat, Salakia, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. So here is a man that the king Ahasuerus advanced. His name is Aman, from Hammedatha, the Agagite. Right? We're going to get right into that. I'm not going to waste no time. He's an Agagite. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 32. Open your book, turn your books to 1 Samuel chapter 15 and verse 32. So Haman, his lineage is that he's an Agagite, right? Let's see something here. So 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 32. Then said Samuel, bring ye hither to me Agag, the king of Amalek, and the Amalekites. And Agag came unto him delicately. And Agag said, surely the bitterness of death is past. So who is Agag? Who is Haman? He is from the lineage of King Agag. which is an Agagite. Who is Agag? He's Amalek or Amalekites, right? He's the king of the Amalekites. Let's get into that. Let's go over to, matter of fact, let's go to Genesis chapter 36. Genesis 36, and let's read verse 10. Genesis 36 and 10. These are the names. Matter of fact, let's start at verse 8. It says, thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. So Esau's name was changed to Edom. Esau meaning wasted away, or Asashawa in the Hebrew, meaning wasted away is he. And Edom is Adama, no, Salakia, Adawam, which means red. Adama is Adam, meaning from the ground. Adawam is Edom, which means red. Verse 9, and these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites in Mount Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons. Eliphaz, the son of Adah, the wife of Esau. Ruel, the son of Bashema, the wife of Esau. And the sons of Eliphaz were Timnah, Omar, Zepho, and Gatam, and Kenaz. And Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz's son. So here's Eliphaz, one of Esau's sons, right? And his son had a concubine named Timnah, right? Hold on. And it says, and she bare to Eliphaz Amalek. Who is Amalek today? The so-called Jewish man. That's right. The so-called Jewish man who funded the transatlantic slave trade. He funded the transatlantic slave trade. As a matter of fact, he was 70 to 100% of the owners that come to America, slave owners, were so-called Jewish men and women. They changed their name, like Robert De Niro and all these other actors when they come over, they changed their names, right? These are Jewish men, but they always try to hide themselves amongst us. So yes, the Jewish man funded the slave trade, and he had most of the plantations in America. But yet every time we have something going on like civil rights, he tried to join himself to us. Why? So he can figure out what's going on. What's going on with God's people? Because they are the head of all nations. Meaning, they are the head of Esau and Obadiah, the so-called Jewish man who sits in Israel today. And how did he get to Israel? If you don't mind me going off, he got to Israel through what? Through America and Britain, through the Balfour Agreement. That's not ordained in the Bible. You don't see where the Most High sent his people 2 times in ships over into the land of Israel. They fit no prophecy. They're not suffering from any curses. They own the television stations. They own the sports network. They own the music industry. They own the pornography industry. They own the weapons around the world. They own the banks, the World Bank, the Federal Reserve. The so-called Jewish man is Amalek, right? And we were supposed to put Amalek to bed. Let's keep going. Let me keep going. I don't want to get offhand because I get upset when I start speaking about Esau, Edom, because that's our number one enemy when you read Psalms 83. All right, let's go back to Esther. Let's go back to Esther. And so we know Haman, right? The Agagite is from the tribe of, well, he's from Agag. He's from Agag, which is Amalek, right? The so-called Jewish man. Let's read on. And let's read verse 8. Salakia. Verse 2. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. For Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, because Mordecai knew who the Edomite was. They don't have to say it in here. He know who Esau, Edom is, our number one enemy. Matter of fact, let me get you that real quick. Let's get Genesis 27. Go to Genesis 27. No. Is it 27? 1 second. Yeah. Genesis 27 and verse 41. And it reads, and Esau hated Jacob. Who is Jacob? That means you people of Negroid and Indian descent, so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. It says, and Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, the days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. So that same spirit, right, that Esau had from the beginning is the same spirit that's upon their people today. That spirit passed down from Esau to all of his sons that we read the genealogy in Genesis 36, and it's just permeated all throughout history. That's been our number one enemy, our own brother, and he come out red as it speaks of in Genesis 25 and 25. So there's no denying that the so-called white man is red. He is Esau, Edom, right? So let's go back to Esther chapter 3, and let's read verse 3. Then the king's servant, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Now come to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. And we know that what a Jew meant to the nations before they took us down. That meant we bowed and served no one except for our Most High God, Yahweh. That's the only person we bowed to, right? Verse 5, and when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath, and he thought to lay hands on Mordecai alone. You hear that? It ain't no difference between Cain and Abel, Esau and Jacob. It's the same. The accuser of our brethren. Who is the accuser of the brethren? The so-called white man. He consistently accuses the so-called black, Hispanic, and native man every day of our life. But don't worry, his time is coming. And it's closer and closer. That's why you see many chariot sightings. You see floods, see earthquakes, wars, and rumors of wars. Mashiach Yahushua's return, so we must right the ship, walk in the way of life, keep the commandments, believe on the Mashiach Yahushua, and treat our brothers and sisters with respect and honor and dignity, those who are following and keeping the commandments, and try to compel and bid those who are not to come back into the covenant. This is our duty, right? Verse 5. Yeah, let's go. Verse 6. No, verse 5. Esther chapter 3, verse 5. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought to scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. You see that? So there's the devil. That's the spirit of Satan. And remember, this spirit is still in the world today, even more so than that. This spirit is not only in the so-called white man, it's in all the nations. They have a pure hatred for us as a people. And guess what? You also have this same spirit is in our people right, as well. When our people see us keeping the commandments, you're like kryptonite to Superman. That's right. So remember, as it speaks in Matthew chapter 10, your enemy shall be them of your own household. So we're fighting a war on all fronts. We have to have the Most High Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, in our corner in order to make it in these last days. We have to. We're fighting our people, and we're fighting all the other nations. So you see here, Haman say, I'm going to destroy not only you, all of your people. Because Haman already knew who the Jews were. We his enemy from Jacob and Esau days. And that's not even too far from this time. Right? Let's jump over to verse 8. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws, therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. You see, he's causing dissension amongst the kingdom, starting with the king. That's the same thing that happens in America, Europe, wherever we are. In the workplace, in the job place, where we can't go nowhere without a so-called white man, white woman causing dissension amongst our people when we're rising up to the top. Because we're not going to rise in their kingdom. There ain't no sense of it. We wasn't brought to America to rise up. We were brought to America to repent. And that's what we got to tell our people. We're not here to try to gain wealth. We're supposed to be moving as pilgrims upon this earth. We have our land is being occupied right now. And that is Zion. And that the Bible speaks of that specifically. We're going back there. So ain't no building up wealth. Ain't no street your street, corner your corner. Brothers, our mind is focused on waking our people up and going back to Zion, man. All right, let's do verse 9. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasures. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. The so-called Jewish man is the what? The Jews' enemy. He's not even a Jew. He called himself Jewish. He's not an Israelite. He's Israeli. You understand? They don't have a 7-counter menorah. They got a 9-counter menorah. Everything is off about this devil. And devil just means deceiver. That's what it means. Verse 11. Then the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also. Do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Let's drop down to verse 13. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to destroy, to kill, to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women in one day. This devil, so-called Amalek, so-called white man, so-called Jewish man, tried to wipe our people out in one day. And we still dealing with this devil. If King Saul had wiped out, if he'd have took out King Agag, like the Most High commanded him to, which he disobeyed, we may not have had this problem today. All right. So we're going, let me see something here. All right, let's go to Exodus right now. Exodus chapter 17 and verse 14. Exodus chapter 17, verse 14. So right now, as we've been going over through the lesson, we see that Vashti, the king's queen, she disobeyed the king's commandment. So the king in turn said, we can't do, well, the princes and the governors and all the people came together, so you can't do this. And the chamberlain Murmukin gave an idea, and the king, he agreed with it. So he put her away, and now he found him another queen. He was sent out to find young virgins to look at, to take the queen's place, Salaki. So favor was bestowed upon our foremother, Hadassah, whose name was changed to Esther. He chose Esther. Now you see him promote an Edomite, which name is Haman, the Agagite. He gets promoted, second in charge, basically, number one in charge. And Mordecai is not bowing to him, because Mordecai knows who this devil is. Now he's plotting to kill Mordecai and all his people throughout every province of Medo-Persia in one day. And now he has a signet with the king's ring. And that means when those letters are being sent out by post, meaning they're going to be delivered into every city where the Jews dwell. And on that day, they're going to kill and perish Jews. Women, children, grandmothers, grandfathers, just like they're doing today. Systematically, they're doing it today. Systematically. All right, let's get Esther 17 and verse 14. Salakia. The book of Exodus, chapter 17, verse 14. And it reads, and the Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. For he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. And that is what you see today. You got videos of now our brothers are getting smart. They know that the so-called Jewish man is the synagogue of Satan, as it reads in Revelations 2:9 and 3:9. And they know that this devil is the one who's running. He's pushing all the rap music got to go through him. All music goes through the so-called Jewish man. All Hollywood is owned by Jewish people. MSNBC, CBS, CNN, anything you watch on TV. Our people waking up in these last days. In Revelation 18 and 4, it says, get out of Babylon, separate thyself, paraphrasing. Come out of her, my people, you understand? And we got to come out of her and come back to the commandments. And Zephaniah 2 and 1 say we must gather together. So you come out of the world, come out of Halloween, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, Easter, Christmas, whatever wicked holiday the so-called white man has set up, and come back into the law, statutes, and commandments. Come back into Purim as we read it. That's right. Come back into Purim, Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, and so on and so forth. The Most High's High Holy Days, which is located in Leviticus chapter 23. All right. Let's see here. Let's get Ecclesiastes 4 and 16. Go to the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 16. Show you something here. Ecclesiastes 4, 16. Because you got a lot of Edomites, even some of our own people that say that, you know what I'm saying, that these people are done away with. Agag and his people. No, let's see. Ecclesiastes 4 and 16. It says, and it reads, there is no end of all the people, even of all that have been before them. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this is also vanity and vexation of spirit. There is no end of all the people. They still here. They still here today. They just call themselves other names. Nobody is calling themselves Amorites, Edomites, Amalekites. You understand? Israelites, except for us. So these people, all these nations have changed their names. Okay, let's get Salaka. Let's get Numbers chapter 24. Go to the book of Numbers, chapter 24. Let's start at verse 17. Numbers 24 and verse 17. Numbers 24 and verse 17. And it reads, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy the children of Seth. That scepter being a Mashiach Yahushua, the word ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Verse 18, and Edom shall be a possession. Who is Edom? The whole entire nation. France, Spain, Germany, Russia, New Zealand, South Africa, wherever the so-called red man sits, he is the nation of Edom. Seir also shall be a possession for his enemies, and Israel shall do valiantly. You hear that? When Christ come back, who the world calls Christ, who is a Mashiach Yahushua, we're going to do valiantly. We're going to be the Lord's battle axes, as it read in Jeremiah chapter 51. Israel. It's verse 19. Out of Jacob shall come he that shall have dominion, and shall destroy him that remaineth of the city. And when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. You hear that? Forever. The Most High, his words are true. What he say is going to happen. So the so-called Jewish man will perish. All of them will perish. They're going to be cut off forever. That dreaded book of Obadiah, that book right there is the dreaded book of the so-called white man, because that's his judgment. They will be cut off for what they've done to God's chosen people. For what they've done to God himself, blaspheming against the Most High and his son, Mashiach Yahushua. All right. So let's go back to Esther. Let's go back to Esther. I'm running in on 49 minutes, so let's get Esther now. Go over to chapter 4. Let's start at verse 1. Esther chapter 4, verse 1. When Mordecai perceived that all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter voice. So what's happening right here? Mordecai heard the decree that Hamath had got signed to kill all the Jews in one day. So now Mordecai is going to go into fasting, praying, right? And let's just get that. Well, let's read on. Verse 2, and he came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province whatsoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning amongst the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So you see that? Nobody could come before the king's gate in sackcloth because you had to be in royal garments, which you're going to get to. But all the Jews in all provinces they started fasting, praying, and all these things. So let's go into that. Show you that this is a custom of our people. Are we doing that as a nation today? No, we want to go out and have a vigil outside in the streets and pray with the other nations. Our ancestors told us they wouldn't. Let's get that. Let's get Ezra. Let's go to Ezra. Ezra chapter 4. Let me see. Yeah, that's what I want. Ezra chapter 4. We're going to start at verse 1. Let's see, are we doing what our ancestors did? Right? Because we want to build with all nations. Let's see if that's biblical. Ezra chapter 4, verse 1. Now, when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of when the children of the captivity builded the temple unto the Lord God of Israel, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, let us build with you, for we seek your God as ye do, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither. Right? So you see, every time we are close to coming back to the Most High, the other nations always put their hand and try to get in to see what we doing. Just like you outside, you at work, you always got some Edomite. What y'all talking about over there? What's going on? You see that? That's Satan, man. They don't never want to see you rise, because our downfall is the rising of their nations. And that's why they're rising today. We've been a blessing to them. How? Through slavery. Through them putting their foot on our necks. Through filling up the prison systems. Through us acting like straight animals through these rap videos. Making money off our talent and off our iniquity. Verse 3, Ezra chapter 4, verse 3. But Zerubbabel and Joshua and the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel said unto them, listen to what our forefathers said, ye have nothing to do with us. Do you hear that? Ye have nothing to do with us, to build an house unto our God, but we ourselves together will build unto the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, have commanded it. You hear that? We ain't building with no other nation. You can't build with the enemy in your congregation. And all nations outside of the nation of Israel is your enemy. Yeah, you're going to have some in there that are nice, some that are genuine, some that will help you out here and there. But remember, they got judgment coming. We're going through our judgment. Daniel was in 2 captivities. You understand? He was a righteous man, right? Jeremiah was righteous. They still went into slavery. So that goes the same for these other nations. They're going to have to suffer from what their nation has done as a people when they put their hands on the apples of God's eye, which is the nation of Israel, so-called black, Hispanic, and native people. All right, let's see here. Yeah, let's get another precept. Let's go to Jonah. Let's go to the book of Jonah. Let me get my other Bible. It's okay. Let me get this. Let me get my other Bible. So our custom was, when we had problems, we sought our God, right? And we sought our God alone. And we sought our God in a fashion that's not being kept today, right? So let's go to the book of Jonah. And let's see here. I think it's chapter 4, maybe 3. 1 second. The book of Jonah. Where you at, Jonah? Yeah, chapter 3. Salakia. Book of Jonah, chapter 3. Let's get verse 5. So the people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. For the word came unto the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne, and he laid his robe from him and covered him with sackcloth and sat in ashes. And he caused it to be proclaimed and published through Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles, saying, let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed nor drink water. So we put fasting. I'm going to just get to it because there's other precepts I can get into as far as fasting and putting on sackcloth. But we took in no food, no water. And that's what was going on here once they heard the decree that was sent out through all the provinces of Medo-Persia to have the Jews put to death in one day. How and why? How? Because this devil over here, Haman, the Agagite, he has a spirit of Cain in him. He wants to kill his brother. Just like we read in Genesis 27. And even today. That's why you see red men gunning down our so-called black men in the street. And that's their modus operandi. It never changes. You see the same cast of characters every single time, every single day on the news. And then they try to tell you, well, we're going to try to change it. There is no change. The only change we have is with this Bible. This is our change. This right here, the Holy Bible. Do exactly what God say do. And separate yourself from them. All right. Let's see. Let's jump over to, we're in Ezra chapter 4. Let's jump over to verse 11. Verse 11, okay? And it says, all the king's servant and the people of the king's provinces do know that whatsoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king in the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Now what's going on? Mordecai is fasting and praying. He goes to Esther and says, I need you to go talk to the king. And the law here in Medo-Persia, you can't go before the king unless he calls you or unless you touch the golden scepter, right? Or you'll be put to death. That's the law of their land. Verse 13, then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. So that's even today. You got uppity so-called Israelites like in Salakia. I don't mean to use that term. When I say uppity, I'm talking about our people that have money. You got Michael Jordan. You got Oprah Winfrey. You got Bill Cosby. You got many, right? It doesn't matter. You can never rise up above the condition of your people. They're still being called nigger wherever they go in some restaurants. And most people don't even recognize them. LeBron James, well, whoever. He getting nigger spray painted on his house. By who? The same one we're reading about right here, Haman and his people. It ain't gonna never change. You got 2nd Ezra 6:9 said, Jacob is the end of the world, and Esau is the beginning of it that followeth. That's what God says. So they're the end of the world. They're ruling right now. And they know that our rulership is next. Under who? A Mashiach Yahushua, the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. So go back into that, right? We have Mordecai. He's trying to tell Esther to go before the king. Let's read. Verse 14, Esther chapter 4, verse 14. For if thou altogether hold thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, meaning somebody else going to come up against us if you don't go in and speak to the king, right? But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the king for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go, gather together all the Jews, no, everybody. Gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 nights, Salakia, 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mother Esther, she said, you know what? I'm doing this for my people. I'm going to stand up for us as a nation of Israel. I'm not going to get on TV and see my young black men and women being gunned down in the streets and then agree with Haman and his people and go along with the same rhetoric, the same, context. You got the same thing. You're going to agree with them. No, you're not going to agree with that. You're going to get with your brothers and sisters out here and you're going to pray together and you're going to come up out that situation as one people. But we ain't going to do that. We can't do that. That's why Zechariah 13 says, 13 and 8. 2/3 of us gonna perish, man. And that's 2/3 of our people who are put on this Babylonian mindset. Just like we had the Greco-Roman mindset, the Roman mindset. Now we got the American, aka Babylon, part 2. Read Job 11:6, double in meaning. Part 2. America, aka Babylon the Great, daughter of Babylon. All right. Let's jump over now. We're going to read chapter 5. I'm going to try to wrap it up. Actually, I'm going to try to go and wrap it up real quick. So I'm going to skip around on this one, because I had a lot of precepts to bring out, but the time is ticking. So forgive me. Salakia, forgive me. All right. So let's jump over to Esther chapter 5, verse 4. Esther chapter 5, verse 4. And Esther answered, if it's Salakia, let's start at verse 1. Esther chapter 5, verse 1. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house. And the king sat up on his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, what wilt thou, Queen Esther, and what is thy request? It shall be given to thee to the half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, if it seem good unto the king, let King and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. So here it is, Esther being wise. She wants Haman to come to the banquet. Why? Because she's getting ready to reveal the plot that he has placed upon our people, right? Let's see here. And let's jump over to verse 9. Then with Haman forth, Salakia. Yeah, verse 9. Then went Haman forth that day joyful with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he had come home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. And Haman told them the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and the servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did not let no man come in with the king unto the banquet, and that she prepared but myself. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king. So here it is. Haman had his first meeting with Esther. You see that? So he's happy. And remember, nobody knows that Esther is a Jew. Now you saying he looking at Esther, he can't tell? As I stated, we have some of our women that look like other nations, man. And that's why Esther had not revealed herself, due to Mordecai telling her she was very beautiful. I wish I had some photos and videos. I don't have it. I'm sorry, some pics set up. I don't have it set up like that yet. But Lord willing, I will. All right. So let's read verse 13. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the gate. So even amongst this, right, show you this spirit this devil got, these people have for us. He's getting promoted. He thinks he's getting promoted. He thinks he's getting, he's getting favor showed up on him. He still hates this black dude over there so much that he's willing to kill him. And let's see what he do. Then, and this should tell you them as a nation. Verse 14. Then says Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends unto him. You see that? They all together. From the judicial seat, from the prosecutors to the defense lawyers, they all in the same boat. They all fall under Leviticus 5:1. They all working together, man. Democrat, Republican, Independent, don't care what they are. Two sides of the same coin. And yes, the so-called white woman, she always yells rape. She's been doing it through her history. Look at our brother Emmett Till, how he ended up, and countless brothers after that. You understand? The face of exonerations in the world is the so-called black man in America. Every time you look around, who's getting exonerated? Don't be fooled. The so-called black man and black woman. Hispanic man, Hispanic woman being exonerated daily in America. Why? Because they set up unrighteous laws and unrighteous decrees against us and consult wickedly against us, just like here in verse 14. And all of them under Leviticus 5:1. All right, Esther chapter 5, verse 14. Then says Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged therein. Go thou and marry with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made to his detriment. All praises be to Yahweh by Shema Shah. So when you follow the story, you see that our brother and sister who are Jews from the tribe of Benjamin, because when the kingdom got split, right, after King Solomon, you had Jeroboam, Rehoboam. The kingdom got split from the northern and southern kingdom. Southern kingdom consists of 3 tribes, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And the northern kingdom consists of Ephraim, that was the head over the 10 tribes. Okay? And they got separated after that. The 10 tribes, as it reads here in 2nd Ezra chapter 13, they come over to a land called Osiris, which is America, right? So they come over to this land while we were going through the rest of these captivities from Babylon to Medo-Persia to Greece to Rome, now aka America, or a transatlantic slave trade. Well, sub-Saharan, it's so many. But this is mainly our people, the so-called Jamaican, American Negro, and we all mixed up, but the so-called black tribes, as you would say. All right. Kind of went off on that one. Let's see. So let's see. Let's jump down. Let's read Esther chapter 6, verse 1. On the night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of Chronicles, and they read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai told of Bigtanah and Tarash, 2 of the king's chamberlain, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor and dignity have been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servant that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak on the gallows that he made, prepared for who? It say him, but prepared for Mordecai. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? Because he had just had a banquet the night before. Now he's like, man, who the king gonna honor, man? It's gotta be me, because I'm eating tonight with him. I'm dining tonight, right? Verse 7. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delight to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. He looking at himself thinking, it's going to be me, man. I'm finna put the king's crown, finna go on the king's horse, put his apparel on. Yeah, because I'm coming over to infiltrate anyway, prior to the Grecian captivity. Don't let that go over your head. Because the Edomite came in here right now to infiltrate before Alexander and all his people, his father Philip, and all the Edomites infiltrated and defeated the Medo-Persians and became Greece. That's what's going on. All right, but that's something I'll get into that before I end the video. All right, so verse 9. And it said, let this apparel and his horse be delivered to the hand of the one of the king's most notable princes, that they may array this man withal, whom the king delight to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighted to honor. Then the king said to Haman, make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, and thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew. Now that must have stung Haman, that Edomite, in his heart, to see the so-called black man rise above him. I'm sure it stunned him in his heart, right? That sitteth at the king's gate, let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, brought him on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delight to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate. But Haman hasted to his house mourning and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise man and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be the seed of Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fail, thou shalt not prevail against him. Call Halal Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai, man. Call Halal Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai. Ain't no nation gonna prevail against us. As long as we stay true to these commandments. And that's a small lesson in this story. Keep the commandments and live. Proverbs 7 and 2. Keep the commandments and live. All right, verse 14. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlain and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther prepared. So the Most High is working, man. It's working. Let's continue on. Chapter 7, verse 2. And the king said unto Esther on the second day of the banquet of wine, what is this petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given at my petition, and my people at my request. Now, this is the first time I've heard her say my people in this chapter. So now the king, he's going to say, okay, your people. Because you're going to see the king don't understand. Because he don't realize Esther is a Jew. For we are sold, and my people to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. You see that? Even if we had been sold, right, Esther wouldn't have said anything. Because we know the will of the Father. We still would have been sold, but we would have been able to function as a people. That showed you the humble and humility and meekness that Esther had for us as a people and her people. Verse 5. Then King Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he and where is he that durst presume in her heart to do so? And Esther said, the adversary. Listen to that. And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and queen. You hear that? The adversary. That's in Revelations. The wicked. That's in Job, man. Come on, man. The enemy. Revelations, Salakia, Deuteronomy 28 and 68, man. Sold to your enemies. Sold to your enemies. Bible is beautiful. And the king arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden unto the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen up on the bed wherein the queen was. Now this devil is in the queen chambers, man, just like he was during slavery. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the words went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Sure. Call Halal Yahweh. Verse 9. And Harbana, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken, good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. The king said, hang him thereon. So they hang Haman on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king wrath pacified. You understand? So the moral of the story is you have an Edomite from the tribe of Amalek, the so-called Jewish man, who is the Jewish man today, tried to take us out as a nation, man, in the Medo-Persian captivity. Let me get first Maccabees. Hold on. 1 second. Salakia. Matter of fact, let's go to Esther in this book. Esther, this is the Apocrypha. Mine's a little rusty because it's got a lot of wear and tear. But this is the Apocrypha. These are 14 books that were removed out of the 1611 King James Version by the Protestant church, or the so-called white man, right? They removed it because this is the Greek captivity, and it also reveals the end of the so-called white man. It reveals the end of his people, his nation, Edom, right? So we're going to go to the book of Esther, right? And we're going to get one of the letters, if I can remember, one of the letters that the Medo-Persians wrote. 1 second here. 55. Let's see if I can. 55. All right. Yes. And I'm going to get straight to the point. This is Esther in the Apocrypha, right? Esther the Apocrypha, get chapter 16. And we're going to start. First, I want to read verse 1. And then we're going to drop down to verse 10. So verse 1 reads, the great king Xerxes unto the princesses and governors of 120 provinces from India unto Ethiopia and unto all of our faithful subjects greeting. So this tells you that their kingdom spanned from Ethiopia to India. This is in the Apocrypha, right? And his name is Xerxes in the Apocrypha, not Ahasuerus. So it lets you know that Xerxes the first is King Ahasuerus, right? Let me see. So let's drop down to verse 10. And it reads, for Ammon, which is Haman, a Macedonian, what did they call him? A Macedonian, the son of Amminadab, being indeed a stranger from the Persian blood, and a far distance from the goodness, and as a stranger received us. So they're writing a letter about Haman, who came in wickedly, trying to destroy people. I wouldn't read it all, but you get an opportunity, read verse 10 down. It'll tell you, or you read the whole chapter. It'll tell you about Haman, the wicked, who came in with wicked devices to destroy a people. To destroy who? To destroy the so-called black man, who is the real Jew, right? So it says, verse 10, for Ammon, a Macedonian. Now let's go over to 1 Maccabees chapter 1. Go to 1 Maccabees chapter 1. And this will tell you who Ammon is. If you got any disagreements on saying, well, he ain't no Edomites no more. We already read Ecclesiastes 4:16. There ain't no end to all the people. There's Edomites. That's why in Romans 9:13, in the New Testament, Paul revealed it again. He says, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. And the hatred was still there. He couldn't say who Esau, he couldn't say the so-called red man. They would tear the letters up. So he had to write in code, write in slang. This 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 1. And it happened after Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian. Who was Alexander? So-called white boy. Homosexual. That's right, a homosexual. Their true nature. They have no bass in these voices. They don't have the voices of many waters. They're 70 years old and sound like my son when he's 2. And these people set themselves up to be a Mashiach Yahushua, who the world calls Jesus Christ, blaspheming the word of the Most High. They took our word and used it. But it's okay. Double unto them. The Most High God say double destruction unto them. So we went through 500 years of slavery. They're going to go through 1,000 years of slavery and be exterminated, according to Obadiah. So Alexander the Greek, or the freak, was a Macedonian. He was a Greek, right? The Greeks were so-called white people. The Romans were so-called white people. The Americans, the British, the Spaniards, the French, the Belgians, the Dutch, so-called what? You got it. These are the people that's been trying to kill us. So let's just do a recap on the book of Esther. You got it in the beginning, right? Esther, you got the queen Vashti, who is the king's wife. She disobeys a commandment. In turn, Esther now and other maidens are being chosen to take her place. The king finds favor on Esther. He chooses her. Esther hasn't revealed herself to her people or anyone because they do not know that she's a Jew. She doesn't pass for a Jew. That's what it's saying. She doesn't pass, her look doesn't pass for a Jew. I'm not saying she was light-skinned or dark-skinned, because we don't know. But she didn't look like a Jew, right? So the king, he chooses Esther. The Most High has him find favor amongst our foremother Esther, whose name is Hadassah, which means myrtle tree or blossom. He chooses her. Now she's the queen. Then he promotes Haman from Amminadab, the Agagite, meaning from King Agag's lineage. And when you read Agag's lineage, he goes back to Amalek. Amalek is who they are. And the Lord said He's going to have war with Amalek from generation to generation. And we're going to destroy Amalek. Right? Amalek is an Edomite coming out of Esau's lineage, the so-called white man. All of them. But Amalek is the Jewish man. He's the top tribe. Anyway, Haman comes in. He sees Mordecai. Mordecai does not bow for Amalek. Salakia. He doesn't bow for Haman or reverence him. So he decides to kill not only Mordecai, but all his people. So he devises a wicked scheme and talks to the king privately, and then gets the king to sign off on an order that in one day that they kill all the Jews in all provinces stretching from Ethiopia to India. Can you imagine that? That would have been worse than when they killed all the babies 2 years old and under in King Herod, the Idumean's time. And yes, King Herod was an Idumean. That's just another Greek name for Macedonian or Edomite. Right? So then, Esther reminds the king of who Mordecai was. He saved him from 2 chamberlains who tried to plot on the king's life. So Mordecai he asked Haman, what should I do to the man that I want to bestow things on? I'm paraphrasing. And he told him what to do. So he goes and tells him to find this guy, the guy being Mordecai, and it makes him so sick to his stomach, he runs home to his wicked wife, his wicked friends, and his wicked family. While he's yet talking, the chamberlain says, come on to the banquet. He goes to the banquet, and Esther looks over, and this is Esther chapter 7, verse 6. And Esther said, the adversary and the enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king. Esther reveals his true nature, the so-called white man, the so-called Jewish man. Their true nature is the wicked, the adversary. The adversary of who? God. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not the God of Esau. They're adversary of our God. Like King David said in Psalms 139, verse 22. So Haman gets hanged on the gallows that he built for Mordecai to be hung on. Then the decree that went out through all the provinces, we had to band together as a nation of Jews with the help of the king's military and fight against all those people who wanted to put us to death. Because even though the decree come out, we were people of strange laws, strange dress, strange wear, we were strange to all the nations. Let me read something real quick. Deuteronomy chapter 14. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 1. Let's get it. This is what we were. And also what we're going to become again since we failed. It said, Deuteronomy 14, verse 1. Ye are the children of the Lord your God. Ye shall not cut yourselves, nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. And the Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself, above all nations that are upon the earth. You hear that? Peculiar and above all nations that are upon the earth. And it's our rightful position, Israel, so-called black man, black woman, native man, native woman, Hispanic man, Hispanic woman, to come back to these commandments with belief on the Mashiach Yahushua, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, and take our rightful position as gods and kings, princesses on this earth, teaching these laws to our children, our brothers, our people that need us, that are in dark. Stand for the truth. So we have to fight against all those, all up and down through the provinces from Ethiopia all the way to India. But Mordecai was feared because the king put him in charge. So Mordecai became a feared warrior, a leader, a Benjamite, a Jamaican. That's what they would be called today, West Indian. So that's the story. And we got delivered out of Haman and his wickedness. And we gave gifts. But you've noticed that every time we have a holiday, Salakia, every time that we have a holy day, that the so-called white man has invented a holiday. So you got 14 February, or on the second month in the Bible, which will be the 13th. It's not the 13th, 14th of February, but we'll call it that. What did they institute? Valentine's Day. We got Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread coming up. What does the Edomite, so-called white man, institute? Easter. We have Feast of Dedication coming up, right? We just had it. What did the white boy institute? Christmas. Feast of Tabernacles, Thanksgiving, it don't matter. Halloween, they're going to come up with something to counteract our feast days. Let's get Revelations 18 and 4. A few precepts before I close out. Revelation chapter 18, verse 4. Revelation chapter 18, verse 4 says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sin, and that ye receive not her plagues." Not of her plagues. So we got to come out of the ways, the system, the mindset, the ideology, the whatever. You got to come out of it. All the so-called white man ways, Chinese ways, East Indian ways, Arab ways. Come out of their ways. Come back to this Bible, man. Put your fringes on like it says in Numbers 15:38. Let your beard grow, young men. Let your hair grow if it can grow. Let our conversation be holy, meaning separate. Always about this Bible. We got to be like Joshua 1 and 8. We got to speak of the Most High when we in the house, out of the house, with our children at night when they get up. This is what we have to do as a nation and gather ourselves together. So that's a quick lesson on Purim. And like I said, I'm Brother Aaron from Israel Gathering Together, Ghana. This is my first class. And I hope that this class gave edification or gives edification to those who may watch this. And I'd like to give all honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai. Shalom, 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 shalom.